Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Steve Seepersod coming to you from the campus of Binghamton University. Welcome to our webinar today, which is part of Binghamton Success Week. So glad to have you with us for this program titled Fulfillment and Wellbeing in the Workplace. This has been a great week. We had a webinar on Tuesday about managing others through managing yourself. We had, as part of Binghamton Success Week, a panel discussion last night in New York City on building your personal brand. So I know some of you have signed up for the webinar today and probably did Tuesday's webinar and maybe also did the event last night. So thank you to everybody who has made Binghamton Success Week a success so far, and we'll have a great program on tap here today. So as we always do, just a couple of free commercials for some different things happening in the alumni office. The alumni travel program is something that we've recently launched, and we have 3 great trips planned for this year. One of them coming up in about 2 months, the Southwest National Parks. In August, we'll be going to Southeast Alaska, and we'll wrap it up for this year anyway with a trip in October titled Flavors of Northern Italy. Go to binghamton.edu/alumni, our homepage, and you'll find a link right there for the travel program. And one more quick plug, and I want to not take a lot of time doing this because I want to get us right into the topic for today. Check out the Binghamton Alumni Podcast. Just search for that if you're on Spotify. I just released a new podcast episode a little bit earlier this week, and so we've got some great stories there, alumni success stories, wrapped up into interviews that are about 15 to 20 minutes long. They fit in pretty nicely if you're driving across town and want something cool to listen to. I highly recommend the podcast, and it's something we'll be adding to each and every month. So we're very excited about that. If you have questions, start now sending them in if you'd like. I'll put my email address up on the screen from time to time, and you can send the questions in by email or type them in as a comment on Facebook or the microsite, and we will mix these in. And we want the program to be fun and interactive. And now, with that in mind, we'll bring in the featured speaker for today, Lisa Brewer from the class of 1984. She's a professional leadership and well-being coach with multiple certifications, has helped hundreds of clients advance their careers and find good health, joy in what they're doing, and great career success. And she is here to share her knowledge and expertise with you. And we're very thankful that she is here with us today. Lisa, welcome to the program. We'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Steve. And I'm so excited to be here today. I wanted to welcome everyone as well. And let me start sharing my slides here. So today, the focus, as Steve said, is going to be on fulfillment and well-being in the workplace. And this is something I work with people on a regular basis. There's a lot to cover. So the way to think about what we're doing today is that everyone will have a different area of interest, something that will really spark their enthusiasm as we go over and we talk about it today. So what I'm going to be doing is almost skipping a rock on the water, where we're touching on a variety of different topics that you can go into in more depth as you find useful. And in order to help you go into more depth, I'm offering 2 things. First, if you look here, there is a landing page on my website, lisabrewercoaching.com/success. And on there, you can get a free 1-hour coaching session if you would like. And there'll also be a handout that will have notes from today, as well as links so that you can go in more depth on any of those topics. And so with that in mind, let's get started. So when we think about the workplace and we talk about career fulfillment, and stress plays a big role in this. And so today we'll be really talking about different ways of managing our workloads, how we speak with ourselves, our relationships, and our job in order to find as much fulfillment as possible so that we have a great work-life balance. We feel like we're excited to go into work every day, and we are really living our best life. So areas that can sometimes get in the way of this are around just having too much work to do, as it's harder to find people to work different jobs, sometimes the jobs seem to get scope creep and they just get bigger and bigger and bigger over time. So we'll talk today about how to manage our time in ways that can help to make sure that we're really focusing our efforts in the most effective ways. We'll talk about how do we speak to ourselves? How do we encourage ourselves and really make sure that we're mentally in the best space that we can be while we're at work and at home? How we can focus on our relationships to make our relationships stronger. And then how can we take steps to really enjoy our job more? So with all of that other stuff in place, what can help us to really feel energized and excited at work every day? We'll start off talking about focus, self-awareness, and intentionality. And the reason is that if we can't focus, if we're not self-aware, then it's hard to act with intention. And if we're not acting with intention, then it's very challenging to create what we want in life, either in our personal life or in our careers. For those of you who have gone to other presentations, I know that on Tuesday there were some activities around meditation, so I'm not going to focus as much on that. Again, you can find that in the handout with some additional links to meditations you might want to try, and you can see in the bottom of the slide here the link to get to that webpage. But let's start by talking a little bit about mindfulness. Mindfulness is as simple as saying, my brain wants to go here, and I'm going to put it here instead. It's the ability to be very present with what's going on, not to be worrying about the past or ruminating about the future. It's really being able to be present with what you're doing. And there are some very simple techniques that you can build into your day in order to do this. One of them I call the 3-breath technique. And so we can do this together now. It takes just 30 seconds. If you're in a place where you can close your eyes, I find closing my eyes, and my clients find closing their eyes, makes this more effective. So take a nice deep inhale, a slow exhale, a deep inhale, a slow exhale, one more deep inhale, and a slow exhale. And so notice now if you feel any different. If you're feeling more relaxed, which many people do, if you're able to be present a little bit more, the reason this works is twofold. First, when we breathe deeply, we are noticing our bodies more. And when we're noticing our bodies more, it's easier to let go of other thoughts. When we exhale, and the exhale is longer than the inhale, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of the stress system. And so those two in combination help to really help focus us and relax us. What I recommend is, how can you build that into maybe meetings that you attend, where you take 30 seconds before a meeting to just do this, or 30 seconds after a meeting? Or could this be something where every time you eat, you take the 30 seconds to do this before or after eating? But when you add this to something that you're already currently doing, it makes it easier to remember it. Another thing, let's see. I'm not sure how to stop sharing my screen, but thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Another technique that you can use to practice mindfulness in the course of the day is very simple. You can check in with the body part. When I first started taking meditation, I found that I was holding a lot of tension in my shoulders. My shoulders were literally raised a little bit all the time. And so I just checked in every now and then, and I would check in and, oh, my shoulders are up. I relaxed my shoulders down. My shoulders are up. I relaxed them down. It took about 3 weeks, and then I stopped carrying tension in my shoulders just by checking in with my body on a regular basis. Another mindfulness technique could be if you take 2 fingers and you rub them gently against each other, paying such attention that you can feel the ridges on each finger. And just do that now. Just take a moment, noticing the ridges on the fingers. And you may find that it's hard to both notice the ridges on each finger and pay attention to more than one other thing. It's another way of focusing our mind. This is a great one because you can do it out of a screen. You can do it besides your leg. You can do it under the desk if you're meeting in a conference room. So it's very accessible when you're meeting with other people to be able to feel the ridges on each finger and simultaneously pay attention to what's happening while letting go of the worries and what am I going to say next and things like that. Other mindfulness techniques could be every time you wash your hands, notice the temperature of the water, notice the slipperiness of the soap, notice the texture of the hand towel or the temperature of a hand dryer. You can feel your feet on the ground. And in fact, you can even take a moment now and try to find each of your toes. And try to identify each toe individually. You might want to wiggle them in order to notice your toes, but see if you can notice each of your toes. Or you might even feel the pressure of your feet on the ground or the pressure of shoes or the socks that you're wearing. These are all really simple techniques for becoming present very quickly. There's also progressive relaxation, which is a little different than normal meditation or body scans in that it makes it, it's really good if your mind is very busy. When our mind is very busy, it can be challenging to meditate and focus on, quieting our mind. But let's do a really fast progressive relaxation together now. So take your feet and tense your feet. Maybe you flex your feet, you curl your toes, and hold that flex. And now let your feet completely relax. Now tense your legs. Put a lot of tension in your legs, trying to keep the rest of your body relaxed as you're tensing your legs. And relax them. And now tense your buttocks. And relax. And now tense your stomach and your lower back, almost like you're wearing a girdle or a corset. And hold that. And relax. And now tense your arms and your hands. And relax. And now bring your shoulders up to your ears. And relax. And now turn your face into a prune. Really squinch it up. And relax. So these are all really quick, easy ways that you can recharge your focus. So when we think about any mindfulness or meditation technique, it has a shelf life. And so you can think of it as a way of, if your focus and your ability to be present is like a cell phone battery. You need to charge your battery periodically in order to really be able to be present. And these are all techniques that you can use to recharge your battery. So I'm going to bring up my slides again here. Thank you, Steve. And so one of the challenges that people run into with time management is that they have a difficult time focusing. And by the way, I apologize for the noise in the background. As Steve said, life happens and we're having carpet installed. Hopefully they're done with the vacuum right now. So one thing to think about when we're thinking about recharging our ability to focus is, what is the frequency that you need to recharge? So it can be helpful to almost think of creating an energy map. So you look at your day and you say, okay, at the start of the day, what's my energy like? 2 hours later, what's my energy like? And you just track over the course of a day, what is your energy like at different times of the day? And when you notice your energy is starting to plummet, that's where you want to preemptively do something to help you to recharge, whether it's a mindfulness activity, it's going for a walk, it is taking a time to speak with a friend, or just anything that allows your mind to mentally rest. So it's not reading social media, it's not checking in on emails and things, but just what can help you to really rest. When you intentionally build rest into your workday, it improves productivity, focus, and the ability to think more effectively. A second thing that can help if you struggle with focus at work is to match your energy, your task to your energy level. So for example, I find first thing in the morning is when I think strategically most effectively. I have another client where he is most effective doing creative work first thing in the morning. I have a third client where she plans from 9 to 10 in the morning to do boring stuff, because if she doesn't get her boring stuff out of the way, it never gets done and it just builds up and creates stress for her. So think about what your energy level is like at different times of the day and what are the things that require the most energy, and plan to do those at those times of day. If you block your time, like that one client that blocked 9 to 10 for those things, that can be very helpful. There's also a variety of techniques that are needed around priority setting. When we have too much work to do and things are constantly coming out us and we're fighting fires all the time, it's really hard to feel fulfilled at work. And so it's very helpful at those times to think about, how can I adjust my priorities? How can I talk with this intelligently with my boss in order to try and get really clear direction on where I should be focusing? So a tool that can be very helpful for this is the Eisenhower matrix, where the top line, it's four grid quadrants. The top line is important. The bottom line is not important. The left is urgent. The right is not urgent. And then you dump all of your tasks into that grid. Then you can ask yourself a series of questions in order to refine this. It could be things like, who is this important to? Is it important to me, my department, my boss, my loved ones, or is this tangential? Is this someone else that's asking for a favor? Then that leads to whose responsibility is this truly? Over time, there can be a creep and you start taking on other people's responsibilities. And this is a good way of getting a sense of that as well. You can really start to analyze what's the impact of this work, so that you can compare, am I doing the most impactful work or am I focused on administrative busy stuff? And then the last thing also leads to the people pleaser, which is, if you're doing this, what are you not doing? Because every time we say yes to one thing, we're saying no to something else. So when we're very intentional about what we're saying no to, it makes it easier to focus on things that are important, which often leads to a sense of more accomplishment and fulfillment at work. That overall matrix of these are the projects and tasks, this is what's important and urgent, not important, or not important and not urgent, or things you can delegate or batch together or do at energy, less energetic times of the day. The things that are important but not urgent tend to be the strategic items that help to set aside time to work on. And that leads to daily priorities. So you look over your grid and you say, okay, what are the things that I should really be focusing on today? What are the 1 to 3 things where if I get this done, it's going to make a huge difference? Taking 10 to 15 minutes at the beginning or the end of the day to really clarify what exactly am I going to get done makes a big difference. People pleasing and the inability to say no when you've got a lot of things on your mind. This is where it can be very helpful to, again, say, okay, if I say yes to this person, who am I saying no to? And when you put it in those terms, it can be helpful. And even a sticky note on your desk to remind you to do this can be very helpful. Perfectionism is something I'm very familiar with, and a lot of my clients struggle with this as well. So if perfectionism is something that is making you work more hours than you want to be working, it's taking time away from your family, it's leading to just inability to find downtime during the day, then some strategies that can help with this is first to ask, who is determining what done looks like? Who's setting the expectations? Is it you or is it the customer? What is it that the customer actually needs in this situation? And what is it that you feel you want to add up and above what the customer is asking for? And that customer could be your boss. It could be your direct report. It could be an external customer. It could be an internal stakeholder. But what exactly are they asking for? And when you sit down to do the task, if you truly define, this is what I must get done, it makes it much easier. And how will I measure when I've accomplished that? Then you have more of an ability to go in and say, okay, did I finish this? If you choose that you want to go up and above that definition, then you can stop and you can say, okay, what will this extra effort produce? Who will that product of this extra effort be meaningful to? And is there, what am I saying no to when I'm saying yes to putting extra time into this? So, Steve, I've just spoken almost nonstop for 20 minutes. Are there any questions or anything that have come in?
Well, I think we're of the same mind here because I was going to jump in with a little bit of a personal story and use it as a time to get a quick plug-in to get people to send questions by email, as we're almost midstream and a lot of information has been shared so far. And my compliments on pressing through all of this when so much is going on at the house. It reminds me of, I had this winter session class and I had gutter cleaning scheduled for the afternoon and the class was in the morning, and guess what? They came early. They didn't even tell me. They just showed up. And so I've got like all this water spraying and all this noise, and the dog is barking because they didn't want the crew there. And just got to plug through and go on as best you can to say the fun of live television is certainly, I think, what we're experiencing today. But looking at that slide and reflecting on it personally, it's just really interesting to think through some of it as far as what I've learned by trial and error over the years, as far as the times of day when my energy picks up and goes down, and what exactly is realistic to be done based on how I'm feeling and what time of the day we're in. And I found that I come in the morning and what I have energy to do are very tactical things like expense reports, making a hotel reservation, or just things that I can just get done quickly and hopefully build up momentum to do the bigger things during the day. And that's in the absence of things that are what you put in the quadrant of important and urgent. So if there's stuff like that, obviously you get to that first and do the more tactical, lower value things later. But if everything is kind of at the same level, nothing's really rising up, let's do the easy things first. I found that I like to exercise at the end of the workday. I used to go run in the morning and I'd get here and, the first half of the day was such a waste because I was just completely wiped out. I said, I don't know how people find that that gives them energy, because for me, it's the opposite. It takes it away. I want to take a nap after. So at least this way I take a nap at home and workday is done, and I haven't messed up anything. But what I found is that the time that I've found is most effective for ideation is late at night. And so I've got this little black notebook, like a sketchbook, and I flipped through it. I showed somebody, I said, this is like the manic mind at work. And I just, if I get an idea, I write it down. Doesn't mean the task gets done because it's 11 o'clock at night, but at least you don't worry about it because you've written it down. The written page remembers it more than the mind does. So it will always stay there, and you know you can come back to it and feel at least you can put your head on the pillow at night and sleep, and not worry about, when I get up, I have to do X, Y, and Z. It's like, and you build that assurance that it'll get done.
Yeah, that's great. And I actually, for people that have a difficult time sleeping at night, that's often what I recommend is keep something next to your bed where you can take notes when the thoughts come up. And even as far as putting together a daily to-do list, one of my clients said he experimented with doing it at night and doing it in the morning. And he found that if when he put together his to-do list for the next day at night, he was thinking about what he had to do all night long. So it worked out better for him to create that to-do list in the morning. So yeah, all of that is, thank you, Steve. Those are great examples. Okay, so now let's move on to how are we talking to ourselves? So a lot of times I have a lot of clients where they beat themselves up when they make a mistake, and they have a really difficult time letting go of those mistakes and recognizing that they're just human. And there's a 3-step process for self-compassion that can be very helpful for this. The first step is recognize you're going through something that's challenging. A lot of times we don't even acknowledge the fact that things are challenging. Like the people came to install the carpet right as I'm about to give my talk, and it's very noisy in here. That's challenging. Then the second step is to think about who is someone who you really respect who's gone through something similar. And so it was very helpful when Steve said, yeah, his gutter cleaning example of the gutter cleaning people came early and it interfered with the talk that he had to give. When we recognize that it's not us, it's a human condition, it makes it easier to let go. The third step is to say, if a loved one, a child, someone who you really cared about was going through something similar, what would you say to them? Because that's often what we need to say to ourselves. So in this case, life happens. A lot of people work from home right now, and I'm sure that they're going to understand the noise in the background. And Steve can let me know if the noise is so much that of a distraction that I need to put in my headphones. When I was in my last in-house role, I was in a project where everything was going wrong all the time. I was learning so much that I was making mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake. And my boss and my trainer were fantastic. And that every time I went up to them and I said, I screwed up again, they said, it's okay, don't worry about it. If it was a really big screw up, they would say, it's okay, don't worry about it. What would you do differently next time? I heard that so much over the course of the first 3 months in this role that it became a mantra in my own mind. So what is it that you can say to yourself to counteract that harsh critic that is trying to tell you that you're wrong, and that life is about to end? This was a horrible mistake. That voice that's telling us that could be called the judge. So there are all different types of voices in our head. Some of them are very compassionate and loving and wise and empathetic and curious. And then there's those that are like wagging a finger at you. They're when we're under stress, when fear is higher, when there's something that's going wrong, it's easy to characterize that as being the judge. Where the judge judges ourselves, it judges others, and it judges circumstances. And the hard thing about the judge is as soon as the judge gets the littlest opening, it starts judging all over the place. So if you judge yourself, you'll start judging others. If you're judging others, you might start judging circumstances. And it's like a boomerang. If you let the judge in, it's going to boomerang and come back and hit us. So there's a very simple process for quieting the judge. First is to recognize that the judge is there. And the simplest way to recognize it is if you're feeling any negative emotion, the judge is there. And it's not that what the judge is noticing is irrelevant. There are times where what the judge is noticing is highly relevant. But if you're in negative emotion, you're in a stress response. And if you're in a stress response, your brain actually starts to shut down and you're less capable of dealing with whatever it is that the judge is bringing up, unless it happens to be something you have to run away from. Our brain shuts down under stress to move all the energy into our limbs so that we can flee. So first we recognize the judge is present. Then we say whatever we're thinking, we assign it to the judge. So the judge thinks, I should have told the carpet people that it was unavailable for them to come in the morning. Then we do some mindfulness exercises. So we can focus on our breathing. We can focus on finger rubbing. We can notice our toes. We can just take 10 to 30 seconds to, again, distance ourselves a little bit more from that judgment, from those thoughts, from that stress response. So we recognize the judge, we assign the thought to the judge, we do some mindfulness exercises, and then it can be very helpful to tap into the better part of ourselves, the best part of ourselves, by getting curious or empathetic or thinking of things we're grateful for. So we can think about if we're judging someone else, what might they be going through? How would they be feeling if this was happening right now? And just really tap into trying to understand if the other person is yelling and screaming, or if they're in a negative mood, recognize that they're in a judge hijacking. They're under a lot of stress, and it's very painful when you're being hijacked by the judge. So that can help us to have empathy for someone else also. We could ask, we can get curious and say, okay, here's my assumption about this situation. What else could be true? What's another way of looking at this? If I was looking at this and I was a child, how would I see this situation? If I was a senior leader, how would I be seeing this situation? If I was a puppy, how would I be seeing the situation? The other thing that we can do is we can think about what we're grateful for right now. So if we are finding, for example, just say you had a performance review and you were given some critical feedback that you weren't anticipating. Maybe you can be grateful for, okay, well, now that I know this, I have an ability to change this. Or it could be something as simple as, I'm grateful, I know it's not happening in New York right now, but I'm grateful that there's a sunny day outside. I'm grateful that I have a warm place to be when it's so windy outside. So those are easy ways to not only shift our internal self-talk, but when we shift our internal self-talk, it changes how we show up in our relationships. If we start to get curious about why a person is reacting in a particular way, it's not important that we necessarily get the answer right. It's more about the fact that we're giving somebody the benefit of the doubt. We're seeing that there may be more ways of looking at a situation than how we looked at it initially.
I'll jump in with a question, and then I'll pull the slides down for just a second and put this graphic back up, and then we can put the slide back up in just a little bit. In looking at what you had on the last slide, one question that comes to mind is, how do you coach someone, and how much more difficult is it in working with somebody where they have a critical parent? Because you have the voice of the judge going through your head at any given moment that's ready to pick apart whatever it is, the slightest thing that you may have done wrong, whether it's your fault or not. And when you have a critical parent, there's a longer history around that, and even worse, there's a face to attach to it, and it's just very, very easy to readily call upon that image at a time where that's really, like, gonna be the least helpful thing for you.
So actually, you bring up a really excellent point. When we can personify the judge, it makes it easier to say the judge is not us. So if that critical voice is your mother, it's your father, it's your teacher, um, it's very helpful to personify it, because what we're looking to do is say that is not us. So, for example, my judge, and this shows my age, is Al Pacino in the movie The Devil's Advocate. Because my judge is very calm and cool and rational, but it's the devil. And so it really makes it easier when I see, oh, this is not me. This is actually some sinister force that's trying to make me think of something. So if our parent has been very critical of us, that could be the judge. And you literally see it's your parent and you separate. But there's a whole that question that you brought up, Steve, is not something that we can answer in 1 minute. This is something where a free coaching session would be helpful, because there's a variety of techniques that can be used when we have that very ingrained neural pathway that says, okay, judgment is connected to this memory and 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 this memory. We need to create new links to new memories of compassion in order to counteract that. And that's usually a longer process. Okay. And so the last thing when it comes to relationships, and this was very relevant for me because I was very socially anxious for much of my life. And it was wonderful to read the Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama. And he had a phrase that I have used so many times with myself and others, and it's reinforced by Nicholas Epley, who is a professor at University of Chicago, who wrote a wonderful book called Mindwise. And it's that the world is full of lonely people waiting for someone else to make the first move. So we don't want to impose ourselves on other people. And so sometimes we'll be, especially introverts, we'll hold ourselves back from reaching out and setting up a networking meeting, getting to know other people in the organization, really building those friendships at work. And friendships and relationships at work are highly associated with fulfillment in the workplace. So how can you think about who in your organization would you like to get to know better? And can you invite them to lunch one day, or grab coffee together, or set up to go for a walk during a lunch break or something along those lines? All of those are ways that can be very helpful for strengthening relationships and having a more fulfilling work. Okay. Now what I'd like to do is bring you through a thought exercise. So if you're in a place where you can close your eyes and think of what is a place, a job that you just absolutely loved. Maybe it was a particular role that you had. Maybe you were volunteering. Maybe it was a project or a class in school. Think of that time that you were really loving the work that you were doing. And now think of a very specific time that you were doing that work. What was one particular day, one particular experience where it was just really fulfilling? And you were being your best self. And as you're in that scene, see what there is to see, hear what there is to hear, feel what there is to feel. You might even smell what there is to smell. Let that whole scene come so alive that you can see yourself in it. As you're there, notice, what are you doing? What's your energy like? What is standing out about this situation? Who are you interacting with and how? And you might want to take a moment or two now to open your eyes and jot down your answers to these questions so that you can really capture what is it that really brings you alive when you're at work, when you are at your absolute best. Who are you? What are you doing? What kind of work are you doing? What type of people are you interacting with? Are you being a leader? Are you being strategic? Are you being analytical, creative, curious, collaborative? So, for example, for me, when I am at my absolute best, I am tackling a new problem or situation in a collaborative way with other people, and we are putting together plans that are going to make a significant impact against this problem. I love the whole problem solving and creative mode. When things get routine, I get bored out of my mind. So, what is it for you? How are you at your very best? And Steve, why don't we have you jump in here for a second and give an example of who are you being when you're your very best?
Yeah, these are great questions. And so, yeah, I'm it's fun to be put on the spot like this and
Sorry
think
for
about my ideal
cornering
work
you.
environment. I, I think, it's for me, like solving the juicy challenges is, something I really find fun. So you said when there's no problem to solve, life gets very boring. So I think when, it's comforting to have a routine and things you depend on, and after a while, you start to rebel against that because you're just bored of it and you want something different. You're meant to stretch yourself in a different direction, and and I find that's very true for me. I like a routine. I like to set it up. I like to live through it, and then after a while, I need something a little bit different, and so I need a new challenge to solve. And um, I like to interact with other people that have a very team-oriented mindset, and not just because I'm on the air here doing the show, is that I really feel like the people I work with in the alumni engagement team have that mindset that where we want to help each other, we want to get the job done, and it's not so much about who gets the credit. And we feel proud of the product that we put out at the end of the day, whether it's a webinar or an event or a publication that want to represent Binghamton at its best and put a good foot forward for us. And so that's the kind of thing that energizes me, is to work with good people who are all committed to getting stuff done and that are not doing it trying to compete with each other, and they want to be seen as the person that gets stuff done, but the no I in team sort of concept sounds cliche because you hear that all the time. No I in team. It's like, all right, do you have another expression you could roll out? But really, I think it holds true of that, and that energizes me to keep doing more and more. And it's like um, I like things in the work environment or personally that to me it's going to sound like overly heady of a topic, but they feed the positive like rewards in the brain. The feedback loop is positive. So um, it's a personal example, probably has nothing to do with this, but I had some health tests done last week and they came back really good. It motivates me to go out there and keep exercising. So you got a good result. What you're doing is working, keep doing it, things like that. And, when there's a need to change course, you change course, and then, hopefully you see the correction did something. So everything's a work in progress, always tweaking with the formulas, as you say. But the peak experience is feeling like you're getting out of something what is proportional to what you put into it. Do you feel
Right.
proud of what you did at the end of the day? And if you didn't, back out there another day and don't dip into the judge. It's easy to say, like, well, you just messed that up again. And it's like, would you tell your kid that? And I love that you had on the slide of how would you tell your child um, how to handle something. I had something like that last night where my son came up to me at 10 o'clock and said, Dad, I'm really worried about this. And it said, okay, it's okay to be worried. How does that make you feel? Let's dive into that, and say, okay, well, it's good to be concerned about that, but the reality is, this thing instead. So, and hopefully he felt better going to bed at night thinking about that instead of saying, well, that's a stupid thing to be worried about. Why would you care? That's not going to be helpful to anyone. You wouldn't tell your kid that.
Right.
You shouldn't tell yourself that, and just
Right.
turn that off, whether it's a parent voice in the past telling you that or not. Whoever it is, if you have a persona or you don't, make sure that's not your persona.
Right. Excellent. I love that you also brought up culture, which brings us to our next slide. Um, because the thing is that, so we've just captured the best situation. Where are you at your best? So now what we want to say is, how is that different from where you are right now? So when you compare where you want to be with where you are, what can we do to bring that new reality into place? So when I was 1 year into my job with Procter and Gamble, I was bored out of my mind. The itch for variety was coming up. It had just become too routine. And so I started thinking of all these projects that could be done. Well, we could do this with displays. We could do this with, reaching out to the customers. We could do all the ideas. And I would share all of them. And I was so frustrated because my boss would slap my hand every time and say I was playing outside of my role. And it made me so frustrated that I was bored and I couldn't figure out how to make my job what I wanted it to be. Fast forward 25 years, and I was working with another Fortune 500 company. And 1 year into the job, I was finding something similar. But this time I had, 25 years of experience behind me to reframe how I was thinking about it. And I decided, okay, I'm just going to pretend I'm leading this department. I'm going to pretend that I own this Fortune 500 company. What would I do if I owned this company? And so I started thinking of a lot of new ideas, but the difference is that this time I was thinking about ideas on how I could optimize what I was actually responsible for. Instead of looking outside of my role, how could I figure out what could be done differently within my role? So I started collaborating with the 8 teams that I was interacting with in order to find out what are their needs, what are their constraints, what are their assumptions, what's driving them, how could I work with them more effectively? And as I did that, I started seeing how there were conflicts between these teams because they had different ingoing assumptions and didn't understand each other well enough. So that enabled my problem solving and collaborating best self to come forward and show them how they could work together more effectively. I started to look at the processes that we were going through and that I was responsible for and seeing, oh my gosh, look at how complicated I've made this. How can I make this simpler? Which everyone on the team benefited from because I was overwhelming them with information. So thinking about what are your best qualities? How can you change how you're thinking about it? How can you pretend that you own the company? And if you were standing back and you were advising someone who was in your role, what advice would you have for them on how they could do their role more effectively? These are all ways that we can really try and bring the best of ourselves into our current job. If there are things that you don't see that could be useful right now, you might want to start having conversations with your boss and say, okay, here's what I want to do. This is how I show up the best. This is, if I was able to do this for the organization, you would be amazed at what would be possible in terms of what I could contribute. And then maybe see if those things could be added into a development plan. Are there specific skills that you want to start using? Are there different projects that you could get put on? But really explore with your manager, how can you bring the best of yourself to work? And you might want to start putting together some experiments to see how could you test the waters. When I first started showing up as a leader, some things were very well received, some things weren't so well received. And so I I focused on what was well received, and the stuff that wasn't well received, I said, okay, that experiment didn't work. Let me try something new, and just kept iterating and iterating and iterating. And they eventually put me in a new role because they saw where my strengths really were. So you might want to even look, if you're not feeling like you can be your best self in your current role, is it your manager? Is it the organization? Is it the department that you're in? Does it make sense to look at other places, either in your organization or outside of your organization, in order to find a better match between yourself and your culture? As Steve was mentioning, when he's around people that are focused on themselves instead of focused on what are we doing together as a team, he gets enervated. He loses his energy. So what environment really brings you to life? And how can you find that in your organization or outside of your organization? And Steve, this is another good time if there are any questions or any comments that you want to make around this.
Yeah, I'm just scanning through. There's quite a lot of good stuff here. I just think about the situation you talked about as far as the worker and the manager, and the worker wants to grow and is told they're outside of their lane. And once in a while, I think to hear that, just my own personal opinion, I'm not an expert, it's just sort of my own quick take on it, is that it's not a bad thing, because I think I've found that if you hang back and you're passive and don't try to show any initiative, people are just going to think you're not an ideas person, and it's not a good thing to be labeled. Where I'd rather be a little bit over aggressive sometimes, but to know, okay, I may be told to dial it back and to be okay with that, and then to take the feedback and do it and not keep ticking the same person off, which is probably not a good strategy long or short term. But then also, and maybe in certain situations, the worker needs to adjust his or her expectations on what they're able to get done within that company's structure, because they may have all sorts of grandiose ideas on how they think they add value and what they could do and how they're going to rise in the organization, feel they're getting smacked down and go somewhere else, and then guess what? Repeat the same mistake, because they just they don't realize that the more they keep repeating the same situation to get the same outcome, it's them that's the problem and not everybody else around them. And that can be a very hard lesson to learn.
Yeah, and Steve, stay on. I'd like to talk with you about this a little bit more. So this is something that I coach people on a regular basis. So a lot of clients I work with are feeling stagnated in their career, and they're wondering, what can I do when I'm stagnating? I have so much more that I can give, and I can't find my way around it. Sometimes it's the soft skills, have you built your network? Are you able to clearly express what it is that you can do effectively, and be able to express that concisely and express that in a way that shows how it can connect to the larger organizational goals? So one of the things that I often will have people do is start documenting their successes so that they don't lose track of them. And then how do they almost pretend they're going for an interview, and they highlight what the best parts of it are so that they can communicate that in a very quick 2-minute story internally in the organization. And that can be very helpful for people as well. But if they keep running into this same pattern over and over and over, and I've got clients that's like, oh, the same pattern is following me from job to job to job, which is why I spend so much time on time management. Time management is not necessarily an organizational issue, although sometimes it is. It's often a personal issue where we don't know how to manage our time well. So there's a simple reflection that I was taught at the beginning of work when I was with Procter & Gamble. And it's 3 simple questions. And we were asked to ask it after every single project that we did. What went well? What didn't go well? What will you do differently next time? And it gets to this. There's a great book called Loon Shots. I know I'm dropping names of books. I love to read. Reading is just like my happy place. And in there, he was talking about the difference between system thinking and process thinking and outcome thinking. And a lot of times people can get stuck if they're focused on outcomes instead of focused on the process. So an example that he gave was that if you have worked on a project and it's wildly successful, and you don't analyze why it was wildly successful, it could have just been luck. It could have been the way that you approached this problem was really ineffective, but you got lucky. And on the opposite side, you could have had the most fabulous process in the world and you failed because of luck as well. You know, there was something that happened that was unexpected and there was nothing broken in your process. What was broken was just happenstance. So if we really take the time to understand our process and understand how we're approaching things, that can lead to continuous growth and kind of this mindset, growth mindset concept of how can we be continuously learning. And I'm a little bit off script here, but that's okay. I think that it's really important to know, especially for people who might struggle with perfectionism. When it comes to learning, we can always expect there's going to be a dip. And the deeper the dip, the greater the upside learning on the other side. So as we're going down the learning curve and it's like, oh my gosh, it's getting worse and worse and worse, we can consider it's almost like emptying out a closet in order to reorganize it. It's going to be really messy before you reorganize your closet and put everything back in place. And that's fully to be expected. The messier, the better when it comes to learning, because it makes our brain wake up and make connections and see information in ways that we don't normally. Our brains love to go on autopilot. 47% of our time on average is spent on autopilot. That means that we're doing something without thinking about it. We're driving to the grocery store and we're not paying attention to traffic. We're thinking about work or we're thinking about a conversation we had. And we get to the store and we don't even remember how we got there. That's an example of being on autopilot. Autopilot is great because we can't do our work if we have to think everything through all the time. But if we are never thinking things through, that's where we get caught in the judge. That's where we get caught in routines that don't enable us to change and grow. Steve, if you'll share the slides again, or you can come on if there's something you want to say about that.
It was funny because I was thinking about the last item on. I'll go back to
on the prior slide.
Sorry, both touching at the same time.
You touch it.
Okay, let's go back to this one here. How could needs be filled outside of work? And it's something I personally have lived because, like many others, you say about the auto loop. You just go through the same processes over and over, and especially if you've been doing something a while. And I think about the phrase, if you keep doing the same things you've been doing, you get the same things you've been getting. And so looking at how needs can be filled outside of work or ways that you can do things outside your job that allow your creative energies to come out, or if there's something that you want to do that you can't do in the present environment, but you can find another place to get it done, that just changes up the energy and you get a different outcome eventually. And you learn something new, you get the confidence from seeing that you applied your talents somewhere else, and it helps you do your primary job better. People start to see you in a little bit of a different way. It changes the energy up. So I love this last one. And so it can be, some things need to be on the autopilot because you don't want to think through a process that should be something that's quick. It's like you already know how to do an expense report. You don't need to read instructions about it. That should be fast, and it frees up to the mind to think about the things that really should have the greater amount of thought put in.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so I'm going to, we're almost done. So I want to throw this up here. So if you want, because I have a client in 30 seconds. So if you want to learn more, go to lisabrewercoaching.com/success. You'll find a handout with links to a lot of information. You can have a free 1-hour coaching session if you want. Think about what you want to experiment with from what you heard today. think of 1 to 3 things that you want to start trying and put them into your daily routine. And it's been really fun, Steve. So thank you so much. And um,
I think I jumped us ahead one slide, so we have a little
yeah,
bit of time. We can hit this if you would like. Even though we're right at 1 o'clock, it's not a hard stop on my end, but I know it's a
yeah.
busy
So
day
you
for
can
you.
leave that up. And maybe, I mean, these are things. So think about what you want to try. And then the things to think through in order to actually get it into action well is what do you need to start doing? What are the obstacles that you need to plan for? One of the reasons a lot of things fail is people don't, we get overly optimistic. We say, oh, I'm going to go exercise for like 30 minutes every day for the next 2 months. And then we realize life happens. If we don't plan for the obstacles, it's really hard to actually follow through on our intention. And then we want to think about how we can remember to do it. When I started getting back into exercise again, I kept a log. And in that log, I wrote down what exactly I accomplished every day. And for me, being able to see how my strength was growing over time was highly rewarding. So what will help you to remember to do this? Is it sticky notes? Is it logs? Is it an accountability buddy? Which brings us to the last point. How can you keep yourself accountable? Is there a friend, a family member, a coworker that you can share your goal with, and they can check in with you periodically to see how it goes? But I do need to run to another client now. So Steve, it's been a real pleasure. And if
Lisa,
anything,
thank you so much. This was awesome, and so much great information was shared in such a short amount of time, and maybe a bit overwhelming. So much to think about, and each nugget, I think, is something all of us resonate with. And as you said, take 1, 2, maybe 3 things to work on. You're going to get frustrated if you try to do it all at once. It's not a recipe for success like with anything else. But to keep the goals realistic, jump in, celebrate the successes, and then keep going. And so a lot of great stuff was here. So thank you, Lisa, very much. I appreciate you sharing your time with us today.
you're most welcome. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Bye-bye.
And thank you all for joining us here on the webinar as part of Binghamton Success Week. And these recordings are going to be archived. You can watch them on the Alumni Association Facebook page or on the microsite. The recording will be available immediately. So if there are screenshots you'd like to take of the slides Lisa showed, or things that you want to go back and listen to, these items will be up there for you to take a look at. So check that out at your leisure, and we'll be back next week with another webinar on Wednesday. An alumna will join us to talk about her journey from film school to working in the movie industry in Hollywood. Should be a great program. Binghamton.edu/alumni is our website. Learn more about all of the lifelong learning offerings that we have, volunteer opportunities at the university, live and virtual events, lots of ways for you to be involved with us. So for Lisa Brewer, I'm Steve Seepersod. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you on the next webinar.